There are a lot of assumptions that are built into the question, and one is that there is a canon of art history, and it's important to have canons, because behind canon is a whole set of aesthetic judgments that are, of course, in part the point of what we do, how we direct other people's understanding of art, and what's really, at the heart of art history. But the idea that canons are somehow universal, that they are omniscient, that they come from a space above, is just false. And we sort of all know that it's false. And so the idea that there is somehow one canonical art history and other local specificities is really can be replaced by an idea of situated art histories. If we just operate honestly with the idea that aesthetic judgment is about deciding who we should all be looking at, and have the idea of situated knowledges, then you can dispense with this sort of worry about the relationship between the universal and the local. What I think really there hasn't been enough attention paid to in modern South Asian art history is patronage, and to the history of basically how artists are able to afford to make the work that they're making. We've focused on institutions, which are the sort of frameworks for the transmission of ideas about art through pedagogy, but we haven't really looked as much at patronage, and partly this has to do with a kind of shyness about money, but it's also just that work, there's been a kind of reluctance to do that. I think that you can point to two very big sets of ideas, and one is the kind of Shantiniketan Baroda nexus, where you have a focus on what K.G. Subramanian called the environment, which is basically the world around you. And again, it's a very honest look at, what is important in my everyday life, what do I look at that really impacts me. That sort of environmental impulse, or that kind of contextual impulse, I think still reigns supreme in contemporary art. Then the second is really the articulation of feminist art practice in the 1980s, which is not quite modernist, but really there's a kind of look to feminist practice around the world, in America, in Europe, in other parts of Asia, for a kind of global project that really comes just before the contemporary articulations. And so you can see it in the work, the practices of somebody like Pushpamala, or Anita Dubey, or Rumana Hussain, or Nalini Malani, Nilima Sheikh, this kind of group of feminist artists that emerged in the late 80s and early 1990s, whose work has just been utterly foundational. Let's be specific about what counts as global, and if we want to talk in the contemporary sort of context, then you're talking about the period of globalization, which is a sort of post-Cold War, 89 to 91 kickoff point to different forms of capitalism, the liberalization of the Indian economy, what have you. Okay. That's global. The international system of understanding art predates that. And of course, the relationship between the nation and the global economy is, could be understood from within art and from within other aspects of social life. And I think that it's important to keep both of those frameworks happening, because they do happen. And I'll just talk a little bit about the example here that I like is to think about the R-PAR project, which is this project moving art across national boundaries between India and Pakistan in 2000, 2002, and 2004, Obviously, you're moving art because it's extremely difficult to move artists across those borders because of the constant tension between the two countries. So you have this need to use telecommunications in order to move things across, and so you move data, you move images that are then printed and placed in these different spaces. But underlying all of that, the reason why the project is so useful is because it came out of an exchange between Pakistani and Indian artists in which they understood that somehow they got each other's work. They understood each other's work despite the fact that the two countries had been in isolation. And so you have international there, you have global there, but you also have a much deeper sense of a sort of cultural continuity to linguistic forms, cultural forms that really broadly predate both of those formations. Any analysis of art has to take advantage of all three of those frameworks. So you say is, but underneath that is kind of a should, right? And of course, morally, of course I can't say that money should have anything to do with the visibility of art. But if we live in a world of is, then what we have to do is to be honest about the role that patronage plays in the production of art. What we are lacking is a kind of clear-eyed understanding of the relationship between patronage and production. And if we have that within it, then we can understand how visibility is connected to the circulation and exhibition of art. Now, we can say that that shouldn't matter, but art needs an audience in order to work, and visibility and audience are very closely connected.